All of this will be presented in the most positive of lights, of course. It's a privilege to be chosen to inaugurate System 666. The whole world is watching, because the Israeli program will serve as the prototype for every other nation. You are at the cutting edge of a brave new world, the first people on earth to step through the door to utopia. I believe the Antichrist and his false prophet will actually think the Jews' acceptance is a fait accompli, especially since they've made it quite clear that they've got no qualms about using force and intimidation to get the job done. No one will be more surprised than they when the Israelis stay away from the sign-up centers in droves. By the end of the first week, when roughly a quarter of the population should have been marked, only 2 or 3% have shown up. Television commercials and radio spots are hastily thrown together, urging the populace not to wait till the last minute. Avoid the crowds. As the second week wears on with the same pitiful turnout, it begins to dawn on the authorities that they may have a problem on their hands. They begin to put 2 and 2 together. Low turnout at the sign-up centers, lots of reported absenteeism from work, people calling in sick but not seeing their doctors or buying medicine, much more traffic than usual, especially in the outlying areas, grocery stores experiencing shortages of canned goods and other imperishable foods. Gradually it becomes apparent to the hapless workers tasked to implement the mark and the oath. Israel is not buying it. Worse, they're not just staying away from the sign-up centers. They're running away, leaving their homes and businesses, packing up what they can in their little cars and scattering to the 4 winds. Soldiers are dispatched to direct them back to their homes, but this proves to be harder than herding cats. Civil disobedience is rampant, and the soldiers, whether IDF or UN, are as likely as not to be in sympathy with the fleeing multitudes. By the beginning of the third week, the Antichrist knows he has a full-scale civil meltdown on his hands. It's not an organized rebellion, though. He can't arrest the leaders. There are no leaders. Nobody's standing on the street corners or gathering crowds at the Wailing Wall, making fiery speeches and implanting the seeds of sedition. Nor is the Knesset fomenting this uprising. 80% of them are missing in action, too, as it turns out. The Antichrist issues orders that the people fleeing the cities are to be detained, and if they resist, they are to be shot. What has happened? What would make millions of law-abiding Israeli citizens leave their homes and businesses and run away in panic? It's a warning that they've been hearing for the past several years from 144,000 young Jewish zealots. The warning is recorded in the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, but the message is for them. The message is for now. The warning, they said, is from the Messiah himself.
When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the set-apart place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house, and let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing babies in those days, and pray that your flight may not be in winter, or on the Sabbath. Matthew 24:15-20.
Now we know why all the haste is necessary. When the Antichrist perceives that his plan isn't working, he will try to slam the door shut on all this do-it-yourself emigration. Those who know what to expect, those who have heeded the words of Yahshua, will get out immediately. Those who hesitate, like Lot's wife, those who wait for 2 or 3 weeks to make their move, will be far less likely to successfully escape. And where will they go? I'm going to go way out on a limb here. I know you think I live there. We have seen how the nation of Jordan, ancient Edom, Moab, and Ammon, is reduced to a severely depopulated pile of rubble during the War of Magog, probably due to a combination of factors, perhaps by VX nerve gas from Syrian missiles redirected by the hand of God. You can see my speculations in chapter 17. Then by Gog's armies devouring the land like locusts on their way to the killing fields of Israel, followed by nuclear devastation at the hands of the Antichrist, in the end, Israelis will end up exercising de facto control over Jordanian territory.
They, this would be Israel, shall lay their hand on Edom and Moab, and the people of Ammon shall obey them. Isaiah 11:14.
Or how about this one?
I heard the reproach of Moab, and the insults of the people of Ammon, with which they have reproached my people, and made arrogant threats against their borders. Therefore, as I live, says Yahweh of hosts, the God of Yisrael, surely Moab shall be like Sodom, and the people of Ammon like Gomorrah, overrun with weeds and salt pits, and the perpetual desolation. The residue of my people shall plunder them, and the remnant of my people shall possess them. Zephaniah 2:8 and 9.
But perhaps the most compelling clue is this little snippet.
Let my outcasts dwell with you, O Moab, be a shelter to them from the face of the spoiler. Isaiah 16:4.
Therefore, I believe that many, if not most, of Israel's fleeing multitudes will hide out in Jordan, specifically in its more mountainous regions east and south of the Dead Sea. Joshua, after all, said to those in Judea, "Flee to the mountains." This would explain several things about the enigmatic Olivet Discourse passage. The Jordan River, usually a trickle these days, is considerably harder to ford when it's swollen with rain in the winter or spring. Of course, it's never swollen these days because most of the water is drawn off for agricultural irrigation, but things might be different after the Jordanian and West Bank Palestinian farmers are dead. And pregnant or nursing mothers, they'll be entering a land that has seen the ravages of nuclear and or biochemical war. Between fallout, pollution, and famine, it won't be the ideal time to be faced with caring for little ones. And the Sabbath? In Israel, nothing much works on the Sabbath. And besides, if you're a Jew piously trying to keep the rabbinical law, you won't be able to flee very far within the confines of a Sabbath day's journey. 2,000 cubits, about a half a mile. Some, of course, won't flee at all. Some Jews will stay in Jerusalem out of confusion, inertia, or fear of the unknown. Some will actually believe the Antichrist. Others, atheists to the end, will remain in the city, hoping to cash in on the financial opportunities that will surely arise in the capital of the New World Order. But Satan and the Antichrist are learning by experience what Yahweh has known from the beginning. The Jews are a stubborn and stiff-necked people. That's why Zechariah predicted,
The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half of the cities shall go into captivity, but the remnant of my people shall not be cut off from the city. Zechariah 14:2.
The Hebrew word golah doesn't necessarily mean captivity as it's translated here. Its primary meaning is exile. Its root, galah, means to denude, especially in a disgraceful sense. Hence it is properly used of both being sent into captivity, because captives were usually stripped, or of being driven into exile without one's worldly possessions, as when Muhammad drove the Beni Kanuka Jews out of Yathrib after stealing their possessions. The latter meaning is the precise description of the Jews' flight from the Antichrist following the abomination of desolation. Yahshua specifically told them not to go back to their homes and pack up their stuff. He didn't actually say they wouldn't have time, though that's what we all tend to think when we read the Matthew 24 passage we just quoted. But that's not exactly true. They've got a month to comply with the order. The real problem is that the Antichrist, knowing the Jewish propensity for rebellion, will be leaving nothing to chance. Speculation factor of 4. He could easily have their homes watched with roving UN goon squads tasked to make sure the Israelis volunteer to take the mark of the beast. If they go back to their homes to gather their belongings, they'll run the risk of being caught. So, Zechariah is telling us that half the Jews in Jerusalem will escape with little more than the clothes on their backs, and the other half will stay only to suffer a new pogrom, being robbed, beaten, and raped. The city will once again be trodden down by Gentiles. More evidence.
Behold, the whirlwind of Yahweh goes forth with fury, a continuing whirlwind. It will fall violently on the head of the wicked. The fierce anger of Yahweh will not return until he has done it, and until he has performed the intent of his heart. In the latter days you will consider it.
Israel will indeed consider the furious whirlwind Yahweh has unleashed against the wicked Muslim invaders in their land. That is precisely why they must now flee. They know the Antichrist's claims are bogus.
At the same time, says Yahweh, I will be the God of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus says Yahweh, the people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness. Israel, when I went to give him rest. Yahweh has appeared of old to me, saying, Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love, therefore with loving kindness. I have drawn you, again I will build you, and you shall be rebuilt, O Virgin of Israel. Jeremiah 30, verse 23, through chapter 31, verse 4.
Beginning with a recap of the judgment meted out in World War III, Jeremiah reiterates Yahweh's promise that the Israel that sees and survives the war of Magog will return to him and will be sheltered in the wilderness. He finishes by assuring his chosen people that he will rebuild their nation. I presume he's talking about more than infrastructure, but also lives and relationships, especially their relationship with him. Hosea knew something about rocky relationships, for Yahweh had told him to marry an unfaithful woman just so he'd know and communicate what it felt like to be the God who loved Israel.
She will chase her lovers, but not overtake them. Yes, she will seek them, but not find them. She will say, I will go and return to my first husband. Hosea 2:7.
He's talking about Israel. The Jews took pride in their laws, their superior chosen people status, their position and place. And even when it became gruesomely obvious that Yahweh had separated himself from her because of her spiritual adulteries, Israel continued to chase gods of her own making, a god of intellect and reason, or one of religious exactitude, hoping she would be able to either think or work her way back to Yahweh. But pride of intellect and true faith are like oil and water, substances that can enjoy no lasting relationship.
Therefore, behold, I will allure her, will bring her into the wilderness, and speak comfort to her. I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor, as a door of hope. She shall sing there, as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up from the land of Egypt.
The parallel between the rescue of Israel under Moses and that at the middle of the tribulation will be lost on no one. As we have seen, the destruction of Pharaoh's armies in the Red Sea will have its direct counterpart when the desert swallows the Antichrist's pursuing forces. See Revelation 12:16. Will the valley of Achor, which leads to the Dead Sea from the west, be the scene of this deliverance? Will archaeologists 1,000 years from now find the Antichrist's tanks and armored vehicles strewn like broken toys through the valley of Achor, just as they have found Egyptian chariot parts scattered across the floor of the Gulf of Aqaba? One can only speculate. Perhaps it will happen some other place, but it will happen.
And it shall be in that day, says Yahweh, that you will call me my husband, and no longer call me my master. For I will take from her mouth the names of the Baals, and they shall be remembered by their name no more. Hosea 2:14-17.
The relationship Yahweh seeks is that of a husband to his wife, not that of a master to his slave. It is one of mutual companionship, love, and intimacy, not fear and intimidation, the marks of all satanic religious counterfeits. Note that for the umpteenth time he stresses the importance of names, whereas they had purposely forgotten his. Though Yahweh was referred to by name 7,000 times in their scriptures, they will at last know Him by name, and conversely, the names of all the false gods they had ever worshipped will be lost through neglect.